I went ahead and sent the link. Yeah. I went ahead and sent a link in our GDSC announcements channel, I think, and I put the sandbox that we're all going to use together on there. So you can, if you want to code and follow along with me, I'm going to be showing you guys exactly the code I'm doing, why I'm using it. But if you want to code and follow along and get your own little like portfolio or a web page out of it, please feel free to do so. And if you're having trouble accessing the link, just let me know and we'll figure out a way to get it to you. Okay. Are you in our GDSC Discord? It's on our GDSC is our Google Developer Student Club.
Oh, okay, no.
Yeah, so let me see how I can possibly send it to or like display it for you guys. I wish I had a QR code now that I think about it. I can make it really quick. Is there any way for me to share this with people? One second. What's up, Luke? Okay, cool. Let me just do this. All right. And then 1 second. Okay, so scan that QR code and it'll show you the sandbox that we're going to be using. Trust me, it's thick. I promise, guys. And that'll have like that'll give you to like a basic React app that you're using to create React app, and then I'll explain a little bit of like how it's structured and how we're going to structure it and everything you're going to need. It also includes some of the dependencies we're going to use. One of them is a UI component library. You know, you can build everything up in CSS from the ground up, but personally, I think that's kind of hard. And I'm just going to get you guys what you need to get going. And if you want to customize all of your own items, go ahead. Or you want to build everything custom made, go ahead. So just when everybody's ready, is everybody, can I get a thumbs up or something? Anyone having trouble getting it? Does it work? Yeah, what's that?
So this be recorded so they can watch it.
Yes, it is recorded. Yeah. And the audio is probably kind of bad from standing over here right now, but when I get on my computer, you'll hear it much better. Yes. Oh yeah. So let's everybody's got that? Everybody who needs this got it? Right? You don't have to code. It's just if you want to, you're gonna get, and then you can fork over your own version too. I think you might need to do that actually. So don't just start writing in there. And I'll just show you what forking over looks like really quickly. I don't know if you might need an account for that, but you can just click this button and then get your own version of the code. I don't know if I think if you edit it now, it'll edit like the one that I'm working on too. What's up? Oh, okay. Can you guys see now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Looks good to me. It's gonna be kind of wonky on this thing. Can I make the editor bigger? All right, screw it. I guess that's fine. Okay. So let's begin, guys. So this is my Tailwind and React workshop. I'm Diego Garcia. I'm a senior here at Cal State Long Beach, and I'm about to graduate my computer science degree. It's very nice to meet all of you. I used Tailwind and React recently when I was building my own personal portfolio, and I think it's a really fun tool. And I'll get into why I think it's great, and why I think React and Tailwind are nice to use, and why I'm trying to teach you guys about it now. Okay. So, what are we going to cover? So today we're going to go why React. Why are we going to use React? And I'm sure you guys know of other frameworks that are very popular, like Bytes, Vue, Angular. So why we're going to go over React, and I have a slide a little bit about that. I'm going to show you guys the file structure of React.js, how I like to structure my files, and that's going to give you a good overview of how you should structure your files, right? You can kind of do whatever you want when it comes to file structure too, but I'll show you common practices and, you know, what I think are best practices. They're just my practices. Why Tailwind CSS? Why I like Tailwind CSS? Why I think you guys should try it? Maybe you should be familiar. If you guys don't know anything about CSS, don't worry. That's kind of why I'm using some component libraries, and then I'm going to show you like what's why I think Tailwind CSS is good to helpful to start learning a little bit more about CSS too. DaisyUI, it's just a component library. I use that because it's I don't want to design every single thing from the ground up, and I feel like it's a little bit of a waste of time. If you're really into that, of course you can. Please feel free to do that, but not during this workshop, I guess. And then we're gonna go. I'm gonna show you guys how to create a basic homepage for your website, a footer, and I'll probably go over a use state and use effect as well for React. And so if there's a couple of things that don't make sense to you, like use state and use fact, don't worry, I'll go over it and I'll tell you guys what's best. Any questions, by the way? Hesitations? No? Okay. So why React? React is cool because it's component based. So when you're designing sections of your web page, you can kind of think of them like classes. Do you guys know what classes are? Does anyone not know what class is? It's kind of like simplifying your code to a specific section and giving that like one specific job. Like this job of this specific piece of code is to be the home page, right? And everything that happens in here is segregated to the home page. My navbar, which is a pop buttons, that's supposed to be another component. That's my section of navbar, and that's all it's supposed to be. And React is really good for that. It's really good at segregating everything. And when you get into like a big corporation, you'll see that they segregate everything as well into pages, components, and you know, I like that. You know, I want to work on, if I think there's a problem with one specific section, that it stays in that section, doesn't bleed into the whole thing. So, and then React also gives you access to the virtual DOM, the document object model. What that is that it's kind of comprised of like all of your tags that you know about in HTML. I don't know if you guys know anything about HTML. I'm going to assume you do, but if you don't, it's okay to be confused. That's basically all of your divs, your image tags, your paragraph tags of HTML. And with React, you get to access all of those at any time and render things onto them. Are you here for the workshop? Yeah, go ahead and take a seat. And then the final reason that I think React is great, right, is that it has a rich ecosystem. So there's so many libraries and tools that people have created to work on React applications, products. And so when you're out there like trying to find a solution for your problem, there's going to be like 30 or 40 solutions. And that might be daunting, but it's really nice knowing that you're not a trailblazer out there alone, fumbling in the dark. There's plenty of people who have the same issues as you, and plenty of people have solutions to your issues as well. And that's nice. So there's a lot of documentation out there for you as well. So if you get stuck on something, you can find out, you can learn a little bit about how to fix it or possible solution. So that's why we're learning about React today. Oh, and there's a QR here. I'll show you the QR code. This is the sandbox that we're going to be using for our coding. If you're interested in getting that. Do you want to code along with us? Yes. You can, yeah, you can say no. I'm not going to get mad at you. Yeah. Okay, yeah, then just follow along. Trust me, I'll make it real easy and simple. So that's why we're using React. Why Tailwind CSS, right? Tailwind CSS is good because it's a utility first framework for CSS. So what that is that when you're trying to write CSS, and I'm sure plenty of you have tried, right? It's kind of daunting. You can basically put in any values that you really feel like. You can do 1px, 2px, 3px, 4px, right? And you never really know like what's best practice. You never really know, should it be 6 or 8px, right? And what Tailwind kind of seeks out to do is that it gives you utilities of like presets, basically, of like, these are like some design, how do I say, decisions that we've made. And basically, we think that this should be, there's like maybe like 20 or 30 different utility classes for CSS that are effective. And what I mean by that is that it might, for example, if you want to declare a width of a CSS object, Tailwind CSS, while allowing you to do your own custom width, right, whatever that might be, whether it be like 424 px, right, they'll basically just give you a preset of like 8 of let's say it's not in px, it's in rems, but they give you like a set of classes like these are like recommended widths that you should use. And so it gives your page and your like website lots of structure and less. I think it's not as structured as like Bootstrap or MUI, It looks a little bit more custom than that. And so for me personally, when I was learning CSS, Tailwind really helped me because it showed me some of the best practices that people have all gone into a room and decided, yeah, I think these are the good whips that we should be using. And so that's really helpful for me. And I think that's going to be helpful for you guys as well. Mobile first. Tailwind CSS is structured in mobile first. That's kind of like it's really nice because when you're designing something, it's kind of like mobile is prioritized. Then we start talking about desktop and tablet view. And so a lot of the way Tailwind CSS, and I'll show you more about how that works, is kind of structured for that mobile, and then everything expands. And I'll show you how like everything expands with breakpoints. If you guys are familiar with what a breakpoint is, if not, don't worry, I'll show you. And then fast development. Tailwind CSS. What I guess one thing I don't like doing is when I have a CSS and basically you have a CSS and you have like a JSX file or like a React file. I don't want to look between both files constantly to try and get my CSS to interact with my JSX or my React file. Instead, it's kind of inline where I just have one view and then I just put in all of my CSS right then and there. And people argue, yes, that could become cluttered, but there's ways of decluttering. And I'll show you more about that. So that's why I like Tailwind CSS. Do you guys have any questions? Am I not super clear on something? Cool, looking good. Okay. So with that, I think I explained why I like these technologies. So let's begin and let's start going over them. So when you guys open my code, right, you're basically going to see this look. And this is kind of like, if you start a create React app in your own personal environment, this is basically what you're going to get. You're going to get a source with a couple of different files in it. You have an app.jsx, index.jsx, and then you have some public, this is where your HTML kind of lies. And in case you guys didn't know, React kind of compiles down to JavaScript so that, and HTML too. So that's kind of why anyways, this is all important. This is all boilerplate code. This is what you're going to have when you start up your own create React app. And then if you look here, this is our window to see like what's actually happening in our local host. This is kind of what our website currently looks like right now. And it's just hello DaisyUI button. So let's go ahead. And so most of the meat and bones here, index.jsx is actually just going to have, so this is like some other boilerplate. It imports React from React. That's we can use the React library. React DOM is just kind of like, these are just boilerplate, and I honestly don't feel like explaining them right now. So what's most important is our app.jsx. And so if we look here, we can see a button. It has a class name of button. And so our class names are kind of where we're going to define all of our CSS styling. And how is that working? So one thing I didn't mention is the component UI library. So let's go ahead and look at that right now. So this is DaisyUI. Let's look at our components. So here are our buttons. So what this is doing is that it has some CSS classes under the hood, right? So these are probably defined in the package that we're installing. And it might have a padding of like 1 or 2 rem. And then it has a text center, and the text is styled a certain way too. And we're just kind of abstracting that away. They did it for us. And this, I also recommend that when you guys are starting out with front-end development, maybe use a UI library. If that sounds gross to you, then don't, and do everything custom. That's fine. But I think to get everything moving quickly, yeah, I think a UI library is nice. People have worked on this before, and you know, you don't have to like kind of tear your hair out trying to learn CSS while like just trying to do basic things. We're going to do the basic stuff and learn from there. You know, it's kind of like if you have a word and you're missing a couple letters, you can just fill in the blank yourself instead of rewriting the word yourself and guessing what it is. So this is where that button class name comes in, right? And that's what's being outputted right here on our output. Can you guys read, by the way? Is the font too small? Are you guys having any issues with that? Huh? zoom in a little bit. Okay. Let's see. Okay. I hope this doesn't make it too wonky. Okay. So this is like a basic button, and we're just gonna like delete it. So when we start a website, the way I like to start a website is by designing a nav bar, right? And so let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and design a nav bar together, and I'll show you guys what my workflow kind of looks like using this website. I honestly will say that I do use this website UI components, which is kind of how it works. You go and you look for the UI component you want. You can customize it, but you start with UI component from here. So let's find the nav bar. Cool. And for the, I was gonna let you guys choose some of the nav bar items and stuff, but for this specific nav bar, I'm just gonna choose it myself. So this one, I like this one. This is the one that I like the most. Let me delete this. All right. And so let me show you a little bit about file structure here before I even start that, actually. So here in source, we have a couple of different items, and you can kind of think of app as like, let's say that's supposed to be like everything that houses everything in our app, but I'll probably make it a little more sense if I show you what I'm thinking right now. So let's go ahead and segregate into components, right? This is how I was talking about. We want to have components, right? We want to be able to break everything down into simpler parts, and components is one way of doing that. And in components, let's create a new file, and let's call it navbar.jsx, right? So this is where our navbar lives now, right? And anybody having any issues, you guys able to follow that? Yes, make a folder. So in source, make a folder. That source you can call it components, and then in components, make navbar.jsx, but please make sure that the navbar.jsx is capitalized, else it'll bug out. React components need to be capitalized before you can render them in app.jsx. So for now, it doesn't have anything, right? Let me just look at my notes as well. Okay. So the basic, and so we're gonna go a little bit over syntax and how to like build this out basically. And so you want us to type export default function navbar. All right. And then in that, you want to write return, open parentheses, close parentheses, semicolon. And in that return, let's make a space and let's make a React fragment. And I'll probably touch a little bit about what that is. So now this is valid code. And you can kind of think of this like, you know, a class in Java or a def in Python, right? It doesn't take any parameters. And this is like, its most basic returns nothing. Well, this is a React fragment. It could return a div if I want it, right? I can write div, and that's fine. But I like using fragments. I think they're kind of nice and they're kind of recommended in React. But you can really return whatever you want. If you want to write a section tag, like an HTML section tag, that's fine too. This is basically like HTML right here. So now that I have this export default function navbar, don't forget the return, right? Now I need the navbar that we were actually talking about creating, right? So let's go ahead and get that. Let's copy this down. Right, and this is, and so I'll explain what these divs and tasks are kind of doing, and I'll tell you guys like a little bit of how to customize them, and if you really want to go crazy and customize them a lot, you can. So let's paste that in and save it, and then assuming okay, and you won't see anything pop up in this window yet, our display window, and the reason is because we have this class, right, but we haven't called it anywhere. We just have created it. It's valid code, but we just haven't called it anywhere. Like, you know, in Python, you have to call main at the very end of your program, right? And so this is what we're doing. So now we get to go a little bit into importing, and I get to talk to you guys a little bit about how to navigate your file structure in here. So I'm going to name this object navbar because that's what we want. I could really name it anything, right? But I'm going to name it navbar. And then what I need to import it, because right now I'm in app.jsx, and I need to import it from my components folder right here, navbar.jsx. I need to go there. So I'm going to do period slash, and that's to say that in my app.jsx, in the same directory, that's what the period slash means. In the same directory, go into components, right? So now my cursor is kind of like in components, and and since I'm here, I can grab this file right here and grab a slash navbar. Cool. So now I have an item or a variable named navbar, and I can use it. Let me go ahead and take out the divs because I don't like them. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use that component that I imported now, because that's what it is, and I'm going to use navbar, and voila. You guys can see, that we've rendered a navbar in our window here, right? Which is kind of neat, right? Are you guys not impressed? No, that's fine. No worries. Hopefully I can impress you guys in a bit though. Let's see. So we have a navbar. These buttons don't really do anything. And if you read, so we have a navbar preset CSS component. That's what this is saying right here in this div. And remember, when we're doing Tailwind CSS, instead of going to like a separate CSS file, like for example, in app.css and writing dot, let's say navbar, right? And then giving it maybe like a width, like a width of like 300 pixels or whatever. Like instead of doing this, right, we actually just refer to it here in the class name. And so this is actually giving a background. So that's how. So when you're here, right, let's choose a theme. Let's say dark, right? That's kind of the default theme we have on right now. When we go to colors. So these are the colors that are associated with this theme. This is like one of the default themes. We can see the base 100 theme right here, color. And so here I'm saying background dash base dash 100. And I don't expect you guys to remember that class name, that specific CSS class. It's not something that you're going to be able to well, you will memorize it if you use it enough. But it's also mentioned here in the Tailwind CSS docs. So let's see. BG base dash 100. Let's see if I can find the colors here, actually. Background color. Yeah, so here's information about the colors that Tailwind CSS does have. And some of them are like predefined, so I can get like a background of gray 900. And then here is what that actually would look like in CSS. And so we're just kind of like abstracting that and simplifying it here. I think if I hover over it, and then when you install it on your own IDE, if you hover over it, you can see what the CSS is basically supposed to look like. But since this is a sandbox, we kind of don't get that luxury. So this is like the overarching navbar div. Here we have a flex none, right? And you're like, what the hell, dude, what are you talking about? Like, what's a flex none? Like, I literally have no idea what this means, right? So, and I understand what you're saying, right? I get it. CSS is weird and complicated. So let's read about it, right? So here, I would go to flex, right? Because that's what's going on here. And this is what I'm saying that Tailwind kind of helps a lot is when you're trying to learn about CSS and it shows you examples of like how this CSS is working, right? And I do recommend that you use UI components because then they kind of like give you like they built a lot of this using Tailwind. And so when you're like, I'm not sure what this is doing, you can read about it and see why it's doing that and why they did it that way, right? So flex none, if we scroll down and read the documentation, is just taking this item number one, and it's to prevent a flex item from growing or shrinking. If you guys don't know what flex means, that's okay. Don't worry. This is kind of going to show you. So if you see 1 has a flex none, 2 has a flex none, and 3 has a flex. So let's see if that kind of demonstrates. So as you see, as this is supposed to how do I say, simulate your like a view. So like if, for example, if I were to oh, whoops. If I were to minimize this window, that's what it's simulating, right? That's what they're trying to simulate there. So if you were to like to put the window down, you would end up getting like a side scroll. You would end up like it doesn't flex. This number 1 and number 2 refuse to shrink, right? And that's kind of that's supposed to be the container that is housing 2 and 1. They refuse to shrink at flex none. Flex 1 right here, that one. So we have this div. This is our container div, basically our navbar. We have this div right here that has like an SVG, a button, right? So this right here is the SVG. And then the button class is actually just what is working so that when you hover over it, right, it has a button, it's a square, and then also it's ghost, so it kind of like is translucent almost. And then that houses our SVG, which is these 3 lines right here. So you close this SVG, you close the button, and you close the div that's flex none. That doesn't flex, right? So like I can like move, and it's not supposed to. This container is not supposed to get any It's not supposed to shrink at all. Now, let's look at a container that does shrink and that does grow a little bit. And that's DaisyUI. So this is, if you look, this is the container that houses this button right here. Then we actually have our button. So this is the container that houses this thing. Then we have a button that's within it, and that has the text DaisyUI. So that's how that's doing. So like, hello class. So like, if I were to, yeah, I can change it. And so that's that div right there. And this div, under the hood, if we were to look at it, we would see that flex 1 allows a flex item to grow and shrink as needed. So this is why I'm saying, like, it's really nice to learn about CSS using this technology because it shows you examples of what it's doing. So check this out, right? I shrink it and you can see, right? So here we have a flex none on 1. Okay, we know what that does. Here we have a flex 1 on 2 that has a width specified, but it shrinks, right? So that's kind of nice. And you can imagine this number 2 happening right here on this DaisyUI. So in fact, if you were to like kind of imagine it, that pink button, it would kind of stretch out all the way over here. It's growing and shrinking as we need it. You see that? You guys see that? Am I crazy? Yeah. No, you guys see that? Okay, cool. All right. Does anyone have any questions so far? Are you guys getting confused? Is this too much? Okay, cool. All right, good. And then we have over here a flex none as well. And what's kind of neat about that is that as this item grows and fills up the rest of the space, this kind of gets backed up into the corner and it doesn't move. It refuses to move. It's like, okay, like, I'm just not going to move. I just refuse to get smaller. So that's really neat, right? So let's go ahead and move on. So now you guys get the idea of that. Do you have any questions about what's going on with anything there? Anybody? No? Looking good? Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and make this navbar button a little bit more like what we expect it to do, right? Now it's just a button. It kind of flexes when you click on it and it hovers, which is nice. But I kind of want one that does a little more than that, right? Let's see. So this is where it's kind of nice. You can pick and choose. So this is the one that we used. And I want one that actually pops out. And this is the one I want, right? So let me look at the JSX. And this is what the JSX is. This is a complete nav bar, by the way. So this would have the center. And I don't want that. All I really want is this drop down right here. And if you're like, okay, this is another class, and it is, you can find the drop down like somewhere right here. And personally, I just like the way they made it here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that. And then 1, 2, 2. I believe this is the div I want. So let's copy and paste that. So if you guys are like interested in building, and so that what I'm going to do is that I don't want this like this button right here anymore. I don't like it anymore. I think it's ugly. I want the flex none to kind of behave the same way. And what I don't want is this button right here, this button, because that's what houses, the button is what houses the SVG. I like the behavior of it staying put but I don't like everything else under this. So that's what I'm going to take care of. I'm going to take under this. And if I do this right, and I paste this, right, unless it blows up, cool. Now I get the drop down that I want, which is cool, right? So let's do something more fun. So this is cool. And there's a preset class for CSS on dropdown. This tab index is here because in Safari, when the DaisyUI creators made this specific component, they had a lot of issues with Safari, and that's why they gave us a tab index. You can read a little bit about it in the documentation. And then you have the menu, compact, drop-down content. And then we have some more Tailwind. So these are kind of like the DaisyUI CSS classes that are here. These are way more of Tailwind classes. So I'm just trying to like distinguish what is what, just so you guys are aware. And then as you can see, we have our homepage, which is here in the code, portfolio, which is here in the code, about, which is here in the code. Now, let's do something a little bit more fun, right? Let's pick out some themes. How about that? Let's make our webpage color bounce out a little bit more in color. So I'll go to the theme selector here, and then what I'll do is I'll ask somebody. So let's see, who wants to pick a theme out? Anybody? All right, in the back. What's your name? Denial. Denial. Hey, what's up, man? Nice to meet you. Cool. So do you like dark mode or light mode? We're gonna pick a dark mode and a light mode. So just choose one from here. But which one do you want first? Yeah, for sure. Ooh, we like that, huh? Now it's brighter in here. That's actually a pretty good color. So what I'm gonna do is let's see. I'll go ahead and go to the code. Actually, that's fine. So we like Valentine. We all like Valentine. I can see it in your eye. So what I want is, so this is a little bit more complicated. This is how we're going to go into use state and use effect to do this theme. And I don't expect you guys to completely comprehend everything that's happening. Honestly, bro, like I'm like bad at explaining it too, but I'll do my best here, okay? So we're going to call a const, and that's just to define a variable here. And this is how you define a use state. Oh, actually, before I forget, we need to import use state. So use state and use effect are actually like an API library that we have to import. And you'll see this very often when you're working with React. Like, in fact, if you go into front end or work with React for any state of time, you're gonna get so used to this. This is like bread and butter for people who develop in React. So we're gonna import use effect and use state. And hopefully doing this can show you, like, expose you guys to what it is, and you guys can kind of learn a little bit about it. And we're going to go ahead and define a variable. And this is how you define a use state in React. So we define any kind of variable, and this is supposed to be like our base state, basically. And then we also define a variable that updates it. It's like an update function, basically. And then we set that to use state. And we're going to prime it with our string variable that we want. So let's call it Valentine. Whee! So yeah, I know this isn't going to be super clear, but trust me, this is how you do it. So then now let's create a use effect. So basically what this is, right, is that we set a base theme, which is Valentine. That's what we're doing. This is setting a base theme called Valentine. And then this right here is basically like our function that we can use to update in the future. So if we wanted to change Valentine to something else, we can call this, and I'll show you how that's done. So now let's make a use effect, right? And this is that kind of the syntax. I know it's a little weird looking, but 2 parentheses, anonymous function, and curly braces. So we have to have this kind of like hanging out at the bottom. So you can see the amount of parentheses in here, right? Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define another variable. I'm going to call it HTML element. And I'm going to use some functions from the document dot query selector. Cool. And then I'm going to select the query HTML. Okay. So what this is doing is it's pulling all of the HTML document, like, so we get access to the HTML, which is kind of like here index.html, but we get access to it here in our navbar.jsx. Yeah, a little confusing, but trust me, this is correct. So now, and we store it in a variable called HTML element. So this is pulling like the whole document that's tagged with HTML. That's all this is doing. And in this use effect, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see if this was successful, if I actually was able to pull in anything into this variable. And the way to do that, right, and this is just good housekeeping, right? You don't want to just assume that you got the variable you're looking for, is if HTML element, right? So what this is doing is that it's kind of a JavaScript, abstract, I don't know how to say it. Like this is a JavaScript technique, basically. And this is checking to see if it's truthy. So if you guys learn JavaScript, or if you guys do front end in the future, you'll kind of know what truthy means, but we're basically just checking to see if it's undefined, if it's null, right? And this will go false if it's null or undefined. I think there's one more, but I can't remember what it is, or false, right? But if there is something there, then we're good. We accessed it. So we're in this, we can go into this if statement now. We know that there's something there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go HTML.element, and now I'm going to use a function called set, or like a dot notation function called set attribute. And what that's going to be doing is that I'm looking for an attribute called data theme, and then I'm going to replace it with what I have in my current. There we go. So this is actually replacing what I have in my current theme and my state, in my use state. And the reason that I use a use state is because whenever I update my use state, it actually tells React to re-render it. And that's kind of why we're doing that. And I know this is a little complicated. I can see that, I can tell that, like, I know that this is kind of hard to wrap your hand around. Don't worry, this is like just fancy tricks, okay? Like you don't have to know this. And if you get stuck, there's a lot of documentation about this. In fact, I think that's how I learned how to use it. And what we want to do, so the thing what a use effect is good for is that I want this use effect to change every time. So we're giving it dependency. It's kind of like this is like the last argument for it. And every time that the theme changes, go ahead and run this code, basically. So whenever I am later in the code and I'm like, oh, I want to change my theme, and I use this function again, and I change my theme to something else, like, I don't know, let's say emerald. Let's see if that works. That's emerald. So that's what the use effect is doing. It's watching. It's kind of watching every time the use state changes, because that's the dependency. It's watching whenever this changes, and it changes it. So let's stay with my Valentine. Wow, how cute, right? And let's see. So now I think this is pointless. Like what are we doing with this? Nothing really. Let's go ahead and give it like a cycler, and let's choose another theme. But let me see what's the best way to do this. So let's go ahead and give it a swap. And, you know, I really like this one, but I don't know if you guys want to choose. Do you guys have a preference? Do you not care? I'm choosing. I don't really care. All right. So we're going to go ahead and import this swap icon. And remember, when I installed DaisyUI, that's how I got access to a lot of these components. And what I want is I want to change this. I don't like this. I don't, you know, this is not serving me any purpose. So let's go ahead and find it. Here it is. So this is the other flex none that's not reactive to my window changing. This is the button that's here. I want to change that. So now let's add this button, and this is not valid. So let's get rid of that. Cool, it's just really big now, and I don't like that. But hey, it kind of does that. And what's going on there is that this, so in this flex none, this is where that's the container. This is the actual item that we're working with. We have the swap flip, right? Those are DaisyUI class names. But we have this text 9XL. And if we were to look at the font sizing here, you would find that same notation. Let's see. So here it is. Text 5, so text 9XL, which basically compiles down to 8 RAM and 128 pixels, which I don't want. I mean, that's too big, obviously. That's why it's stretching out this whole thing. It looks disgusting. So let's go ahead and make it like 2XL. Boom. small. So that's really nice, right? We got some cool stuff going on there. But let's do something more interesting. Let's make this button actually change the state of our theme. And that would be cool, right? Because right now it's just set hard set to Valentine, and I kind of want to cycle between 1 or 2. So let's choose another color, and it can't be the same guy. So somebody else can choose, right? Let's choose, and you can choose another light color if you want, but I prefer dark. It's just my preference. Anyways, over there, yeah. Forest, nice, excellent choice. That's what I chose too. That's how that's my favorite actually. Cool, man. So what I need to do now is I need to so I know in my head forest is the other theme that I want to swap around to. And I need to kind of make a function that does that for me, right? This function, basically what it do is that it'll use this set theme and change my theme kind of the same way that this is done. And so I'll show you guys what that's like. So right now I'm going to define a function basically, and it's called toggle theme. And this is how we kind of do it in JavaScript. So that's why it kind of looks weird. Like all you Python kids might not be familiar, but that's okay. So this doesn't accept any parameters or anything like that. And this is basically the notation to set a function, or this is kind of what's going on. This is a function in JavaScript, basically. And so let's say if, and you can use a ternary statement or something, but if theme is equivalent, and this is a JavaScript thing as well. This is like saying equal, extra equals, right? This is just getting like, that's what you want to do. It's a really good way of making sure that to check exactly. If it's, let's say Valentine, right? Set the theme to forest. Okay. So this will look familiar to you guys, right? Like this just looks like normal everyday coding. And then if not, set the theme to Valentine. So this is like the case in which it's not Valentine, it's forest. So we're going to set it to Valentine. Okay. So that function is working, but it's kind of grayed out. And what's happening there is because it's not being called. So we need to call it, and we need to call it here based on this checkbox. Actually, this is the input. And so this is one of those things that you kind of just have to know. This is where your on click would be. So we make a property, and it would look like this. Our on click is equal to, and then we call our function, which is toggle theme. I realized that I explained a lot about class names, but I didn't really explain what some of these are, right? Because we have class name, and then you guys kind of know that this is where my Tailwind is happening. Otherwise, these are like known as properties, or you can think of them as parameters, basically. So like a label can take a parameter of tab index. An SVG can take a property of this, of this, of this, of this, of this. And it's kind of like, that's like a React thing. I'm sure you guys would see it in other languages too that I'm not really familiar with. And then like A tags also have them, but I just don't have any in there. And so on click for input is going to call that this function. So let's try it. Boom, dark mode. Isn't that kind of sweet? You guys like that? What's up?
Can we just make lambda function on line 64 itself instead of making toggle theme?
Yeah, you think you probably can. I honestly don't know. I'm not having a lot of experience with lambda functions, but you probably could. I don't know. I couldn't say for certain. So cool. Now we have a dark mode, light mode switcher. That's really nice. Let's get into some more meat and bones. I think we're kind of running lowish on time. I had some more stuff to show you, but let's so now we have like our header, right? And what's really cool about this is it's kind of responsive too. I can show you a little bit about breakpoints now that I'm thinking about it. So when I say that Tailwind is focused on mobile responsive first, I mean it in terms of like, and this is kind of confusing, and you guys are going to run into this too if you're front-end developers, responsiveness and breakpoints. So what we do is that we kind of design this in terms of of like let's say we design this in terms of mobile first, then we worry about everything else. And the way we worry about that is breakpoints. So let's see if I can show you what a breakpoint is using responsive design. Okay. So these are breakpoints: small, medium, large, extra large, double XL. And then if you're working on a project that's like worth its salt, people would have defined these breakpoints for you. So if you weren't working with Tailwind and you're working on someone else's pure CSS file, they would have had to like define a breakpoint, or you define them like this with an media query. That's what it's called. And you've probably heard of those before if you've done front end before. And so what's happening here is that at this breakpoint of 640 px, what we can do is that we can say, I want this specific attribute to take effect now. So like if something got this big, then this attribute would take place. So let's see if this shows it. Yeah, there you go. So, you're at a certain viewport, right? And as you get smaller, you can make it do something completely different, basically. And that's kind of the point. That's kind of what's really neat about them. This is kind of like a very long design, and I want something to happen. Obviously, I can't keep this design when it gets really small for my phone, right? So that's kind of what I'm going for. But when I'm designing, I kind of design for this first, and then I can design something differently. And that's kind of what they're doing here. At a certain point in medium, it flexes, and you guys might not know what that means, but let me just show you a little bit about how I can do it here. So what I kind of don't want is I don't need this here when it's bigger. Then if this is not a phone, then I don't need it, right? Like if I'm super big, do I really need a drop down? And that's kind of a design or a choice you can make. But for me, I'm like, I don't really need it. So what I'll do in this case is I'll say, let's say at a medium breakpoint, let's make it hidden. And if you're like, so let's see if this works. There we go. This is a medium breakpoint. It's because we're kind of zoomed in. So you see how it kind of disappears? And that's kind of what I'm saying is like, and maybe let's make it small, right? Because, so at default, it's there. And the reason I'm doing that is because like this, like I can't say small and then start designing for mobile. Like what happens is that when it's this or greater than, this can take place. But if it's less than, nothing happens. It's kind of, okay, I'm not describing it really great, but I'm gonna do my best here. So what I'm saying is that whenever it gets bigger than small, hide it, because I don't need it anymore. Like at this point, what I could even do is start making new buttons that would have like my home, like all of these here don't have to be hidden anymore. They could probably appear because there's enough space now. That's the idea. And that's why like at a certain breakpoint, I would just hide it. And then I would make other stuff appear based on that. So that's kind of the idea there. And we have that. And so that's a little taste of breakpoints. Really useful stuff though. I will say that. So let's go ahead and make a homepage then. So this is like, we kind of went really hard at components. Let's go ahead and make a new file, a folder here. And let's call it pages. And pages is kind of like so I have this component, right? And I've seen this called many different things, right? I call it pages because that's kind of what it's supposed to be. And what I want is a home file, right? So then I'm going to export. Let me make sure I'm writing this code right. Default function. Let's call it home. All right, and then let's return something. So this is like the basic starter code that you would need for most React components. Let's start an empty JSX, an empty fragment right here. So the reason I do this is because in React, you can only return one thing, right? That's kind of like, that's kind of the way it works. So that's why I always wrap everything like a burrito inside of this tag right here. You can think of it as like a burrito. I got to put the beans, the cheese, and everything in there, but I still need to like have the tortilla that wraps it over. And what I kind of want, and so this is like, I'm going to show you how I use this still. I'm thinking a hero would be cool. And you guys might not know what a hero is. That's fine. Oh, wait, this is footer. Whoops. Hero. And heroes are usually where you find your home pages and stuff too. You can find lots of different heroes. You can use different component libraries. Hell, Tailwind, what the heck? Oh. Tailwind even offers pre-built component libraries, right? This one's I think is like a free one. And here's like a bunch of like, so here's, you can see similar code and it will look like this, right? So that's basically what I'm going for here. So these are heroes, right? Let's change the theme back to Valentine's so we can see better. Cool. These are heroes, right? So this is like how this could look. This could be your website, basically. You can put this picture of yourself, or if you like Spider-Man, that's cool too. Right, so they could be a login here, right? We're gonna go with the overlay, right? Bless you, by the way. And it's this amount of code. Like this is why I'm saying we kind of abstract all of that complicated CSS. Because if you look here, you can wait. Where did I go with that? If you look here, this is way more customized. Let's see. This is way more customized. This is like going by Tailwind CSS by the book. And there's a lot going on. And you know, you guys aren't gonna know everything that's happening here. And I mean, even I don't really. Like I would have to like kind of pick at this a lot. Like this is a padding. This is a breakpoint right here. These items supposed to flex. We're kind of abstracting away. Some people have already done that work for us, and they're giving us like a simplified version, which is kind of housed here. And then if I copy paste that, right? I don't think it's going to work properly. Let's see. Oh, yeah. And I almost forgot. So now we have this function. It's valid code, right? It's here in home.jsx. Does anybody know what we have to do now to get it to render onto our web page? That's right, buddy. You got it. Sweet. So we're going to do that again. We're going to go to import home. I can call this like anything I really want, but make sure it's capitalized because these are only valid when it's capitalized, these components right here. And we're going to call that from, so instead of, so it's in the same directory, right? Like I'm here in source right now in app.jsx. I'm going to do / to say I'm still in the same directory. And then I'm going to go into pages because that's where I put this page that I want. And then I know what I want. I'm in that directory. I need home. So then semicolon. And then home. And if you guys have noticed, let's see. So like, if you look at this function, for example, it's written in a different way than kind of how I've been writing it, where it accepts properties. If I wanted to kind of do that for navbar, like I needed to pass in some information there, right? Because navbar doesn't accept any properties. But if I wanted to, I think what I could do is I can have props right here. And then if I needed to pass something in, I don't know what I would pass. I don't know, like class name is equal to boop, boop. Now I can pass in that class name. So that's kind of what a property is. You'll hear a lot about props in React. And this is just kind of to show you what that is. This is, you see, it's considered a property. And yeah, so that's, I'm just showing you a little bit about that. So if you look here, we also have our hero and it's working properly now, but not really though. It's not really working the way we want it to. So let's go to our page home. And, you know, if I'm looking at this, I'm like, it feels like it's missing something. What's also really neat about this too, is that we don't really define colors explicitly. And when we change themes, those colors kind of change with them, which is really nice, you know? So like I have defined a color here in navbar, BG base 100. But if I go here to colors, BG base 100, or just base 100, right? Because I'm just saying the background, but base 100 is the color we're actually referring to. That's the color. If I change themes, let's say to Halloween, that base 100 color changes. You just can't see it. It's really dark. Maybe I can change it to something less. Yeah, so these colors change. What's really nice about this is when I'm building out an application, and this you're going to see this with CSS as well too. Anybody who's like good at CSS, they're going to define like 8 or something colors for their website. They're going to say, okay, I want this to be my background color. I want this to be a darker tone of my color. Like this is a style that's very often seen in the front end of defining colors, right? And then you can call them in CSS by saying like var base 300 or whatever. Like that's kind of how the syntax would work. And you would call that maybe like in this is kind of like how they did it, where they have an HSL, and this is like a CSS tag. But when you're working on front end, basically you're usually you don't want to start arbitrarily setting colors. You want to use the color style sheet that they have. And that's kind of a nice thing about DaisyUI. And what I'm talking about is that you kind of get some of these design principles down. You can kind of start learning about them. We're running short on time. Actually, I have to finish. Right, we're gonna lose access to the room. Sorry, but this is basically our pseudo website. The reason that this image is not showing as it was on our hero is because when they reference this image, they actually use a URL that's tied to their web page. That's what this is doing right here, this images. So that's the reason that we're not actually getting the image. If I were to copy paste this and go to DaisyUI.com, there's a // I can see the image. I could actually just get the full URL and go to home, replace that full URL with the thing I want. So now I get the full URL, and now I can see the image. So there's a couple of things of troubleshooting. I do think that when you're looking at this, you can get an idea of how CSS works and how it's structured, right? By looking at some best practices. I do think DaisyUI does a good job, and it can kind of help you start from the ground up. But thank you for coming to my workshop. I'm Diego. Ooh. Let's see. I had one thing to show you guys. Wait, it's not the wrong one. Does anyone have any questions, by the way? Anything else? Any last words? Here is the GDSC link tree. If you guys want to stay connected with us, join our Discord or just keep up with us, do that, scan that. And then if you follow my Spotify, that makes me really happy. I like it when I get a lot of Spotify. So feel free to do that. I post playlists and stuff too, but I mean, that's just like, I just thought that would be fun to give you guys. And so, yeah, thank you. My name is Diego Garcia. I'm with GDSC, and hopefully we see you at our next event. Yeah. Feel free to stop and ask me a question.
Before we end, we want to take a group picture. So maybe you want to just take it from there and then.
Claudia.